Perfect. So I know everyone wants to hear from Brian and Chris, so I will be asking questions and will be silent mostly of the time. But I have to say I'm so excited that we are sharing the stage together, and it's really the power of the community. So without further ado, we'll get started with some warm-up questions before we dive into a very, very difficult topic. The first question I guess I will ask you to introduce yourself and share your journey with us a little bit more.
Sure. So I'm Brian Davis. I lead our global risk management, fraud prevention, and payment operations team for Adidas, based in Portland, Oregon. I've been with the brand for a little over 13 years, primarily in a digital operations space. But my time before that was really heavily in risk management and some fraud detection in some other industries. Through my tenure at Audi, I've led operations in the US and then went over to Europe and led operations there, where payment was so close, fraud was so close, that when I moved to a global position in 2019 or so, it landed with me, it came with me. So I'm really happy to do that for the brand and have the time to talk with you all today.
Yeah, great.
Well, first of all, I just want to appreciate Ozge for supporting both the brands today. I don't know if you noticed, but she's got an Adidas shoe and a Nike shoe on. Thank you for that. It's funny, Brian and I actually kind of talked about maybe switching brands, and we thought that might be pushing the envelope a little too far.
Yeah.
But I'm Chris Tiener. I'm the Global Digital Loss Prevention Director for Nike. Been there since 2021. I basically support all of our geographies across the world in strategic digital loss prevention, making sure that they hit their KPIs and they have the technology they need to do their jobs on a daily basis. Prior to that, I was with Walmart in a domestic capacity, basically doing same thing, strategy and operations.
Great, perfect. So I'll warm us a little bit more. So your brands are well known. No one asks you about where you work, what your brand does. But at a family gathering, how do you explain your role?
Funny, I had to do this just a couple days ago. I just tell them I catch bad guys. We try to find bad people who are doing bad things with grandma's credit card.
Okay.
Cybercrime fighter, although I think now in today's world I'm more of a policy abuse fighter than a fraud fighter. But yeah, if you ask my family what I do today, I probably still couldn't tell you.
Okay, very nice, very nice. And then you all have seen my shoes. They're very, very important. But you're also wearing some item of clothing of your choice today. So is there a backstory to what you're wearing today?
Not really. I think I would say the Samba has been in my life since I was probably a pre-teenager. So the fact that it's come back makes me both feel really old, but also really happy. So I'm happy to be rocking maybe the hottest shoe on the market right now.
This was the first item I purchased at the Nike employee store in Beaverton. This shirt, which is really a fantastic place to shop if you work at Nike.
Very good. Okay, enough warm up. We'll get started. So the first topic we are going to talk about is customer profitability and the impact of policy abuse or policy optimization to the customer journey. The false positives are obviously hurting customer experience. They're also killing profitability for your brands, but also all brands in this room. So Chris, I will start with you because I know false positive is very close to your heart and mind at the same time. Can you share with us a little bit what you are doing?
Yeah, I'd love to. Everybody in this room, has the same philosophy as Nike or Adidas or any other company, which is, how do we squeeze as much margin? How can we squeeze as much revenue as possible and benefit for our companies? So something that we've been doing at Nike as of late, which is really diving into our false positives, which basically means, hey, I've got an order that was declined that should not have been. And how do we measure that? Some companies measure that by customer service call rates. One of the things that I did when I was at Walmart, and now that we're doing at Nike, is that we're basically looking at all of our orders that were declined for fraud, and then we're looking at those orders subsequently that were approved by the fraud model. And then you look at the chargebacks after that. As long as you don't have a chargeback, you can look at that as a false positive, and provide that data and that information back to the model just to kind of enhance the model. You do have to, or at least what you'd have to keep some of those attributes the same when you're looking at subsequent orders from a denied order to approved order. You've got to look at, the same shipping address, same email address, same credit card number, same IP, geolocation, and different things like that, because obviously somebody could place an order and it's denied and it should have been denied. They could place another order and change one of those attributes and it would be approved. But as long as those things stay consistent and you get an approval later and you don't get a chargeback, you can look at that as a false positive. So, we've seen low double-digit false positive rates and have really tried to tackle that again, just to squeeze every little bit of margin and revenue that we can back into the ecosystem.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And Brian, I know your motto has been here, this is not just a fraud problem, this is a cross-company, cross-functional problem, and you have been bringing stakeholders in this journey with you. Can you talk a little bit more how you engaged other teams for this problem?
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time really informing the business about what happens, spending a lot of time educating, bringing light to things that people haven't really looked at, or maybe you knew it was there, but you didn't really want to pull back the covers. So we spent a lot of time just really getting some visualizations around, this is the impact of this is the impact of that, this is our mitigation plan, this is where we need you to come in. Sometimes it works really well and we have instant stakeholders who want to fight the fight with us. Sometimes it goes directly against what we're asking a group or department to do. So we try to put the impact at a scale that makes sense to them. So really try to find a common language, a way to speak to them that will make sense. Consumer service is a good example where we measure ourselves on first contact resolution, on NPS, on our NPS score afterwards. And if we are introducing things that are going to create friction to save the business, it's directly against what we're incentivizing our partners to do. So we have to work really intelligently with them to explain the why and help them change their processes, help them change the way that they look at that performance so we can move forward as a healthier business.
Yeah. I'm nodding along and I'm seeing in the crowd, so this is definitely a topic. I'm going to switch us to another dimension. Both of you have global roles, and I think this topic has different, kind of nuances in local markets. So either of you or both of you, can you speak a little bit of your experience of implementing across the local regions and markets and how you look at it?
From a global perspective, at least from a false positive perspective, we don't really see a lot of difference in like false positive rates or anything like that. We definitely see more bot pressure in the Americas than we do any other geographies. But with isolate to that and can reach your strategy solely around that, then it makes it a little bit easier to combat.
Okay. Great. Brian, anything to add?
I'll just add on our side, we're really global, obviously, and consumers are different everywhere. And what we found is what we thought we knew about, let's say, a Latin American consumer and how that compared to a North American consumer. We learn a lot through our integration with Forder and having to spend a lot of time investigating some of these false positives to really train the model and get better. Where this market was a bit more of a plug and play, it just worked. Europe was also very quick to just work, but we had to really invest time in some areas to make sure we weren't having false positives. So I think where the maturity sits and the more consumers or partners you have out there will really help us in fighting that fight.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, super helpful. So I'm going to move us to the resellers and returns. Policy abuse is the new fraud, as I heard from Chris yesterday. I also heard it's an art and a science to balance it out. I think we talked about balance in big, capital letters this morning. So where do I start? So I think I start with you, Chris, again, because I think the Air Jordan releases is all known by every one of us. And I think there are some key challenges that comes with those kind of launches. Can you talk a little bit about that with us? Yeah,
of course. I don't know if there are any sneakerheads in the room. Yeah, 1, 2, 3.
Should we ask hand raisers?
I wouldn't consider myself a sneakerhead, but I certainly do try to get to be a part of those launches and have not been successful yet. So I guess that means I'm not a bot because those seems to have the best luck with those. As far as the approach, with resellers, I think I spoke at this conference last year and said that Nike had just rolled out a zero tolerance policy for resellers, especially when it comes to our launch items, and that has proved to be really successful, especially from a customer fairness, a customer service standpoint. Our customer service scores have gone up, especially when you look at the launch vertical, and still continue to have the pressure with bots. Forder's been really great about helping us combat those and really kind of keep those at bay to create that fairness for customers. So I would say it's going fairly well.
Yeah, definitely. And Brian, in our prep calls, you shared that you have been rethinking about the reseller policy recently. And you have been thinking about what's the policy, what's the best enforcement mechanism. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, I think it starts with the definition of a reseller.
Yes.
So what is a reseller? What is your brand's appetite for having a reseller? At what point does that reseller cause financial damage versus brand damage? These are all things that we internally think about and discuss. And I think going back to even your last question, each of our regions has a different sort of tolerance or appetite for some of these things. So we do really have to approach it in a quite nuanced or specialized way for each of the different regions. But in general, what we really look for is what's going to impact our good consumers and how do we protect that experience. And then secondarily, we sort of bucket the treatment of the resellers, whether that's blocking or not.
Yeah. This is one area I think there are some differences, and even though you're competitive, are you watching what Chris is doing with the zero tolerance and?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd be a fool not to, right? I mean, firstly, they're right across the river, so all the news is also right there for us. But it's a bold statement. It's a bold move to make for their brand, and it's something that we can learn from. So absolutely, we'll be watching.
Okay, very good. So far, would you like to share with us what your thoughts, or should I skip to that question?
What's that?
So far, what are your thoughts about that policy, or you're still evaluating from far?
No, I think it's a great policy. I think it's one that's really difficult to enforce, though. I think it comes down to that definition. If your organization is clear with that definition, you have buy-in on how you handle those sorts of consumers, then it's easier to enforce. How you do it, and how you would do so fairly, I think is a question for Chris.
Definitely.
It's not easy. I wouldn't say that we're perfect at it either. I mean, there's still things that happen from time to time.
Yeah. I think it's not just Adidas watching. Many in the audience is watching that policy as well and trying to learn. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to move us on because I'm keeping an eye on the clock and I have lots of questions. So I'm going to switch us to returns and items not received, which is the other end of some of these policies we talked about on the reseller part. I'm going to start with Chris, you again. Can you walk us through how you combat this issue?
Yeah, just as of late seems to be a really growing issue. I think not only with Nike but with a lot of people in this room is how do you combat returns? How do you combat INRs and refunds? I mean, the entire gamut. And we're receiving, just like I'm sure everybody else is too, empty envelopes at a return center when somebody says they're returning something. Can that impact, and does that impact your refund policy, especially if you're doing immediate refunds? All of those things kind of seem to be kind of the new fraud, policy abuse. One of the first steps that we've just recently taken is just really identified cohorts of customers and their return rates, and identified our heaviest abusers, and the cohort that we just recently selected to really enforce strict policy on no returns and actually no more future ordering would be those that were purchasing at least 60 units and returning 80% of the time. And we have all these different cohorts, and you just have to do the math to figure out what the profitability on those cohorts look like before making those decisions. But something that we're just now beginning. It's a very manual process, something that we'd really like to get some assistance in making more automated. It's kind of the next step for us.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And Brian, I know returns is an area that you have been thinking, innovating, iterating a lot in the last year and still going on. I would love to hear you share some of this goodness.
Yeah, we try really hard to create a seamless and great experience for consumers who have to return a product. We know consumers don't really want to return products, so we want at least the good ones. We really want the good consumers to be able to repurchase with us as quickly as possible because Maybe they wanted a different colorway, they needed a different size. So we spent a lot of time focusing on that instant refund, but what we've done differently than maybe some others before is we've introduced a trust check in that flow. So when you go and initiate your return, we can check right there to see, do we trust you? Do we know you? Do we know your identity? And we can give you that instant refund. Or do we need to put you in a slower lane because we need to learn a little bit more about you? Or do we know that you've abused us before and you've abused us before and we need to block you? So we're spending a lot of time trying to start with that good consumer experience and figure out ways to enable that, and then layer on the protection from some of the bad guys. But it comes with that information. You have to have it. You have to have it automated, hopefully within that flow, because if you don't, then you are left playing catch up.
Yeah, yeah. I love that structure. It's the trust check, then you're routed to the fast lane or slow lane or maybe medium lane, or maybe you cannot even continue. It's a stop.
You hit the dead end.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. Okay. And then how are you mentioned a little bit of different departments, right? The conflict of incentives with customer service.
Yeah.
How is this affecting the other stakeholders in your organization?
It's causing conversations. It's causing us to have that chat about, is it worth it to put this friction in front of a consumer? Mm-hmm. So we've invested a lot internally on how to equip those consumer service agents with the best tools possible to not break their operational workflow, not impact those KPIs, but give them enough information to say, this consumer needs friction, this consumer doesn't need friction, and make a best informed decision. It's not been easy, right? I think anyone who has or looked after, worked with a call center, it's usually an army of folks who are working in a very specific way that you're now trying to introduce something that's going to slow them down. They're not going to create a happy consumer usually, and most likely they're not going to have that consumer satisfied at the first denial. That consumer is going to call back again. So everything that they're measured against for performance, we're working against. So the conversation is really important, but if you bring to them the rationale, the reason, the impact, we found that that's been our best path forward to get them on board.
Yeah, it's a lot of change, a lot of innovation. Exactly. I'm going to bring us to our last topic, which is measuring success, the KPIs. Both of you mentioned a lot of analysis, looking into data, segmenting your customers, creating different lanes. This is all powered with a lot of data, a lot of analysis. You also talked about, bringing others into the journey and using visualization, using KPIs, creating a common language. It all ends up with that KPI that really everyone can feel linked to and understand. So I'm going to ask you a little bit about that part of the business. I think I will start with Chris again, in the tradition that we have been setting in the last 20 minutes. What are some of the key metrics that you're following?
Key metrics for Nike would be our approval rate, both our total approval rate, normalized approval rate, deny rate, chargeback rate, false positive rate as of late, and something that I didn't mention before that we're really kind of digging into now. It's really just kind of like a sanity check on how well our models are performing as your false declines. So these would be the chargebacks that the chargebacks that you receive that you should, the orders that were approved that got a charge. I'm getting myself confused. False negatives. Those are orders falsely declined. I'm gonna have to come back to that one.
Yeah.
I have to think about the
how you
calculation
measure.
in my head.
Yeah. That's fine. I'll pass the ball to Brian, and I will come back to it.
Sure. I think we measure most of the standard KPIs that are out there. I think we spend a really great time. I had a great workshop or breakout session talking about some new ones.
Yeah.
We've also sort of created a new one, I guess. I haven't heard about it before, so maybe if you've heard it. But we've really started looking at a digital shrinkage number, a number that combines not just inventory write-off, which is traditionally how we associate shrinkage, but what do we have in bad debt? What do we have given in manual refunds? We call them goodwill credits or appeasements. So really trying to take a full picture of our output, of our losses, and use that as a guiding metric, as a single point of sort of success or failure across each of our markets. It's an early adoption, but we've got each of our markets, we've got sort of that calculation for. We've been measuring it and monitoring it, and then we can use that, bringing back in our finance teams and others to help drive different behaviors to help hit some of those earlier initiatives.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yesterday we were together at the customer advisory board, and I think the customer lifetime value, and there are very different ways to measure it, but it was another KPI that we discussed on how to bring the teams together. Digital shrinkage, I haven't, heard it before, but I know from you it's another metric. I think there's a lot of evolution on how to create a conversation, right, in the organization that focuses on a metric that actually helps everyone to see the piece. Yeah, definitely. Okay. So I think I'm going to. I was going to squeeze in one more topic, but I think I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go into the wrap-up. Can you share some, wrap-up practical recommendations with the audience today? If they were to go back, they will be asked by their teams or their managers on what would you do differently on Monday, let's say. We'll give them the weekend to rest.
I would say look at your data. Make sure you know what your data is telling you. Dig deep. I mean, you could find a lot of really good golden nuggets in the data that you can pull, especially if you're looking for additional revenue or margin. I think that's probably the biggest thing. And then just, this is my second impact to come to, and just the people that I meet and that I talk to, the things that I learn, from different colleagues, I think is really invaluable. So if you haven't talked to somebody or if you have questions, make sure to ask. Anybody, that's really a good opportunity to do that.
That's great, definitely.
I would sort of continue on that. I think just challenge yourself to think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And does it make sense to keep doing it that way? Introducing a trust check in the middle of a returns flow was not something 2 years ago we considered. But we saw some pain. We figured out, hey, maybe there's something else we can do about that. And with the help of our lovely product enablement team over there, we are able to do that now. And so I think along those journeys, whether it's membership, whether it's any sort of, the payment stuff's pretty sorted, right? But where are you having an interaction with a consumer where you are exposed, that you can do a quick check to say, is it fast lane, is it slow lane, or is it a dead end? Mm-hmm. And just think about your flow. Think about how you interact and where does it make sense to introduce friction. It's not always bad. Sometimes it can be really good.
Yeah, definitely. And then one final from me, maybe a recommendation, maybe an ask, maybe a combination of both. I mean, you can see the power of the community. Please join the community. As customers, we are really stronger together, and I would love to hear your ideas, challenges. We can innovate together, and hopefully this sharing was one signal that will help us all. With that, I'm going to wrap up the session, and I want to thank you all for coming and sharing the stage with us today and being very honest and open with your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.